North Dakota.
Hello,
The
Jeff.
gang's all here. So, hi, we're gonna start the meeting. Thank you guys for being here. Welcome to the select board meeting today, Monday, December 6th. So first, I'm gonna make a motion that we invite Jeff in via conference call.
Second.
All right, then we have to do roll call vote. So I'm a yes. Anna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
All right, Jeff, you're in. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
All right, first up is points of pride.
Sure, I have a couple. I just want to thank Karen for the time she put in to get all the fees ready and the research that went into that. We'll talk more about that down, but that was a lot of work to get that ready. And thank Kara. In her first few weeks, the board's been meeting every week and getting the minutes done. And good job. It's just been really appreciated. So I wanted to pass that on. And just make sure that you saw the thank you note from Cam Burgess, who presented his project last week.
Mhm. Second that. Thank you, Kara. Thanks, Neil. I just wanted to thank everybody who contributed to the Starry weekend. We went Saturday night to the events at the gazebo, and it was awesome. I know there were a ton of people involved in making that happen, and it was really fun. So thought it was a great community event. And thank you to the Department of Public Works, since we had our first, I think, official like freezing rain situation. And it was, as usual, the roads were great. So thank you to them. Anyone else have points of pride?
I think we took the two of us.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'll just put another plug in for Starry Weekend because it was really fantastic.
All right. Next, we have administrative. First up's approval of the consent agenda.
Sure, I'll move we approve the consent agenda of December 6th, 2021.
Second.
All right. I am a yes. Anna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, next we have the public meeting minutes from November 29th, 2021.
I'll move the public meeting minutes of November 29th, 2021.
Second.
All right, I'm a yes. Anna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
All right, thank you for those, Kara. And next up, we have our first public appointment, the Barn Committee. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us back. So back in late September, we were here and we were requesting funds to get estimates for the various options for the police department. And so we're back here tonight to do a presentation, give you the cost estimates for the various options for your consideration. And so Jason has put the presentation together, so I'd like just to turn that over to Jason.
Great.
Should we get to that?
Hi,
How's everybody doing?
thanks for joining us.
Good. How are
Thanks for
you?
having us. Okay, so you may or may not remember September. I basically took the same presentation, added on to it with some additional information. Just take a quick walk through.
Is it not working? Always works in practice.
I'm gonna say no, it's not. Oh, you do that or do I do that?
I don't know.
All right.
It's all right.
Here's our committee charge. Okay, this is me. So last time we were talking about some of the items that we had to get cost estimates for. Thank you for approving that. So we went ahead and completed that work. You know, again, the update that we've done, all the work that we did back through the summer. Really, the big thing that we got here was engaging Milestone, which really is a great construction partner, and I think they were the right company to bring in to do budgeting for all those options. They work in these on these types of projects a lot. So one of the things that we really wanted to talk about tonight, other than dollars are important, is really the use of the barn. And the barn, when you look at all the various people who use it, it really plays a pretty vital role in the town that, to our knowledge, in our discussions, really doesn't have a replacement. Obviously, the biggest one is public works, building and grounds. All the equipment to maintain the fields is located up there. It's in the right location. It's about the right size. I suspect that they probably love to get a little more space, but it does okay. It works for them. Second largest is the recreation department. So all the storage for events, equipment is in the upper level. They did a great job sort of cleaning and organizing some of their spaces. But then we have HISA, Boys and Girls Club. I had that wrong before. The library uses it a little bit, although I think right now it's pretty minimal. Slusser Center. And then something that a lot of people don't know is the fire department actually has some training platforms set up out there where they can do various training exercises, which is nice to have in town. Then they don't have to send members out to the training academy or other. So it's really convenient. And let's see. So remember last time we really had a couple of choices: remove the barn, replace it, or restore it. These are the four options. There was a third option on the restore the barn last time, which we sort of blended into some of the costing. And that was really looking at what we've dubbed code improvements. And it's really not an isolated piece. You're either going to do it as part of another project or not. So these are really the four categories. We'll just walk right across. Replace on the same site. So this is tear the barn down, build a new building in its place. So the building would be roughly 8,800 square feet, which is about the size of the barn now. It would be 2 stories, similar configuration. So it would have the drive under where buildings and grounds are now, and it would have the upper floor for all the storage components, similar to it as now. Budget-wise, that came in at $2.4 million. So before I go too much further, it's important to note the budgeting that Milestone did includes all the construction, includes all the management of the construction, so it's sort of an all-in number. It also includes design and engineering appropriate for that scope. What we added on top of that was owner's contingency of 10%. There's some testing and special inspections that has to happen during construction. So we plugged in 1% of construction for that. And then depending on the option, there's a storage component. So right now, all the equipment, all the items in the barn, if we're going to remove it, would have to be removed and stored somewhere. So we carried a little bit of money to rent a tent or some storage pods or something during construction. So all in, that totals 2.1. Any questions on that? Am I going too fast? Replace on new site. So this is build a new building someplace else on the Houston property. Don, you located it with Frank, correct? It was over by the ball field.
It's beyond the library. The bridge that sits up there behind us.
Okay. That was a new 7,000 square foot building, 1 story. So a little bit smaller, but hoping that we can make it a little more efficient. It was near the ball fields. We would still remove the barn because the question is, if we're going to build a new building, we still have the old structure. Right? So we included costs to remove that. That came in can't quite read it, but 2.3 million. So it was actually a little bit cheaper. However, we're getting less building, so it was a smaller structure. All set? Okay, so stabilization was next. Mic controller stuff.
Of course it did. Very dramatic.
There we go. All right. So the barn stabilization was the question of what's the minimum possible we could do to put a roof on it and sort of deal with the critical things and keep it functioning the way it does today. So there are some structural repairs that were identified on the timber frame. So all of those would be repaired and brought up to made safe. I don't want to say good, made safe. We would jack up the building. We would tear out the granite foundation. We'd pour a new concrete foundation with waterproofing. And then we would set the building back down, and then we would put a new standing seam metal roof. So that sort of gets us back to square one where we are today. That budget came in at $875,000. And then rehabilitation takes it a step further. So it includes all the stabilization items, but then it also adds in putting in the fire suppression system that's been talked about. And in order to put in a fire suppression system, we need to get power, and we need to get heat into the building. It also includes separating with fire rated assembly, the public works from the storage, which you may not have to do, but with the idea that you're going to invest in the building, it makes sense to do. You know, buildings and grounds, they have flammable chemicals and sort of all these things. We're doing fire suppression. So if we're taking it to the next level and really thinking about how best to utilize the building, we thought it made sense to take that step. It also includes all the exterior siding and trim. That's replacing windows, that's restoring the old barn doors, that's siding, that's new trim. So it really takes care of the entire exterior maintenance critical items in addition to the roof. So that total was 1.8. Okay. Any questions so far?
Yes. Focusing on the barn stabilization.
Yep.
And just looking at the budget at this point that the select board is going to present to budget committee Wednesday, in the CID portion of it, there'd be about $70,000 to the Houston barn.
Okay.
Now, in terms of the stabilization, are there specific projects that could be done, you know, something this year, something next year? You know, how could that 70,000 be spent efficiently?
You probably could look at it. I mean, really, those tasks right there are in order of priority. So before you can jack up the building and do a foundation, you need to do the structural repairs. So you'd start with the structural repairs, you go as far as you could with that. The next step would be to jack the building and do the foundation and the waterproofing. So that addresses drainage, that addresses, you know, the public workspace, and really set you on a clean foundation. And that all needs to be done really before you do a roof. Now, part of that is because we're proposing a standing seam roof. So if you put a standing seam metal roof on a structure and then you raise it, you're likely going to kink the roof. Not necessarily, but it's like with an asphalt shingle roof, you might be able to get away with putting a roof on it and then jacking it. But again, that's in terms of investing in the building, a standing seam is much better value, even though it's a higher.
I mean, I wouldn't want us to spend money for something that's going to have to be replaced 2 years down the road.
Correct, yeah.
And do you have estimates of what, say, the structural repairs would be out of the 875?
We'd have to look at the detail of that, but yeah, we do have some of those numbers. I don't have them at the top of my head, sorry.
Well, you don't?
I could make stuff up, but really.
That's quite all right.
So we are looking at putting forward a formal recommendation to move ahead with stabilization. It's really the most appropriate when you consider what the structure does, how it serves the town, and the cost consideration going into the project. It is important to note that, so in the 875, there's about 20% contingency. So unallocated funds, 10% of that was carried in the construction budget that Milestone put together, because nobody's done any engineering and nobody has any detailed drawings of the scope of work. And so all those things, they know that there's stuff that they haven't been told about. So they've accounted for that with 10%. And then we put a 10% owner's contingency on top of that, plus testing, plus plus. So it's an all-in budget, really do that as it is important to know that just in our conversation that the rehabilitation, if you were open to it, we feel is ultimately a better value, but it is a higher cost. And really the cost sensitivity, myself included, is really something we want to consider. However, bond rates are less than 2% right now, projected to stay that way through the cycle. So there may, in terms of a long-term value, it's going to be ultimately the least expensive way to go. But again, we have to get it right.
Can I ask what style of building you're looking at constructing if you replace the barn?
You can ask, but I don't think anybody would have an answer for it.
Okay, well then my comment is $329 a square foot to build a storage building is obscene and not realistic.
Yeah, please.
We had Dave Feller. We had a milestone which gave very, very detailed look at all the costs here. We also had two other people opine on new construction of this type. One being Procon in Concord. The other was Jay Burgess, who was very familiar with. They came up with very
Some of them were higher.
Yeah, summarize.
If we did the stabilization, the 875, could that be one step and then the full rehabilitation would go forward so we wouldn't be wasting money again?
Absolutely. So if you see up here, our recommendation is moving forward with stabilization. Sets the building up where you could move forward without having to go backwards and undo work that we just have done. So our recommendation would be to include work with CIP, include things like electricity and sprinkler systems and exterior maintenance to the structure on a planned expenditure. And that's where you get into, every year you defer those costs, inflationary expenses go up. When you do things as separate projects, that's where it came down to the conversation of best value ultimately would be to do it now. But Frank is
Just speak up. I think Jeff's having a hard time hearing.
I feel like I'm yelling.
It is, I know.
Okay, so next step would be, we're here, provide our recommendation.
All right, thanks. And we're going to work on putting a formal report together with all the background data. I gave ourselves 3 weeks, which is sort of what we had talked about, to put it all together. What we're trying to do is really look at it as an executive summary, but then all of the past data that's been collected throughout the 20 some odd years that we've been looking at the barn, so that we've got a document that puts all the information in one place, along with the recommendation. If you wanted to go ahead, we'd be assisting you with working through with the budget committee, or putting together a warrant article, providing whatever data is necessary, as well as looking through additional funding opportunities. So LCHIP does have grants available. I think it's important that from a budgetary standpoint, we would assume that the town would bear the full cost of the project, and then grants would just reduce that expenditure. Exactly how that works, rather than go into a project assuming we're going to get a grant and then not get it and not have the money to finish. So I think that's just a wise strategy.
I don't think LCHIP would cover anywhere near.
I think LCHIP gives up to $200,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, it wouldn't cover the whole
A
thing.
lot more from the town.
Right, but 200,000 is
Yeah,
still
yeah.
significant. I believe it's a matching grant, so it's a 1-to-1 match.
Which is something you apply for in the spring next year, and then we won't know until I think November. Received it.
Has there been any sort of feelers put out about private donations to fund any of this?
Not by us.
No,
And for the stabilization, is there a certain time horizon that all of these things need to happen?
Well, the building does have a leaking roof right now. And while there's no sustained damage to the structure, historically, buildings like this, once they get they can go pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, is that a year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3? I don't know. In terms of an asset to the town, do we really want to have a building like this sitting there with a leaky roof? It doesn't mean that you couldn't do a temporary patch to buy some time. The challenge is on this roof with the condition, it's hard to tell exactly where it's leaking. If you look at the east side, that all the shingles are basically deteriorated. Yeah. So I'm not saying that there couldn't be an interim protection, but really, if we as a town agree that this is an asset that we need to maintain, then really the wise thing to do is to move forward with the whole stabilization project.
And I think that's where my question comes from is are you guys suggesting that the ask at town meeting, either in bond or some other form, needs to be for all $875,000?
That would be all right.
That's
Yeah.
what I was getting.
I'm not speaking, okay.
and
Looking at my fellow committee members.
I took the time to kind of highlight, looking at the 2 reports back with SFC. What Untitled had done, and just trying to how much difference has this gone. And so I just want to bring some important things to your attention. So the roof, as you just said, we have replaced that, but the shoe's already gone. And so it's sustaining a lot of water damage. The foundation, over the last 20 years, it's out of plumb by several inches, and it has the potential to threaten repairing capacity. The water infiltration and the soil erosion, the subsoil, when it freezes, it keeps expanding and pushing more pressure on that foundation. And if we continue to do that, it's going to stabilize the timber. The frame, the main floor, it made the supporting beams out of the main. And you have particles, so that's keeping the decay going. The attic loft was 3C that was identified in the last report. That carries the load of that has sank 3 inches to detach from the higher foot tendon from the motor from what is in the tie beam. So if it fully detaches, then the roof is at risk of partial collapse. So that is very critical that gets done. And then ignoring all that, the frame itself, the supports of the beams have all come, well, the majority of them have come loose or have detached or are pulled away from themselves. So all of that is really threatening the barn from the wind and smoke. So over the last 20 years, a lot has been deteriorating, and barn is really sustaining a lot of damage, but by driving by and walking in, you don't see it. But apparently the two reports, I can see this very clearly that stop kicking the can down the road and really need to do something. On one day, I'm gonna get surprised. So it's just, but these are just the facts.
20-year time there.
It was about 20 years, that's it.
Do you think the current roof is about 20 years old?
It was done after that.
When was the roof? Yeah, when was the roof repaired?
No one
Like,
seems to know exactly what that is, but it's probably around 10 to 12. We got really terrible.
okay,
It's
There was a manufacturer's failure.
bad.
Probably 15 to 20. 15 to 20.
I moved here in 07 and it was done then.
it had been done.
Yeah,
already.
yeah,
And that's 15.
15 years, yeah.
Okay.
We didn't get the life out of those shingles that.
No, no, and you think that's an issue with the materials and not necessarily to do with the structure or the.
Oh, it was a material failure. There was-
a time when they were bad.
Gotcha, yeah. Okay.
Yep. We reshingled a couple buildings that had the same batches. Not in this town, but I.
But other, yeah. Huh.
You want to lead through the logic of why a bond now, 10-year bond, yes, deal, I don't know. Run the number, so the 10-year.
Yep.
Anticipate, and then see what the tax impact, that would be, my understanding is that no tax impact, just coming here is what pay the first bond number, the tax impact.
Yeah.
23. And just to run through that scenario, did you have a chance to be able to tax impact?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jeff.
If the actual cost to build a new 10,000 square foot storage building was $1.2 million, would that change your recommendation?
A new building?
You said a new
That's what he's,
storage building, Jeff, 10,000 square feet?
New 10,000 square foot building.
You built 10,000.
Versus 1.6.
What was the DPW? 10,000 square feet?
I'm not sure.
After it burned, and that was 5 years ago.
That's not storage. That's huge.
8,000.
Also in that estimate that was given is the demolition of the barn. It's also in that place.
Right.
If we're gonna build a new one, we're gonna be taking down the old one. It's deemed not worthy of money. So we're not comparing apples to apples.
This is kind of a very, very bad stuff. When you're doing a bond, with equal payments over 10 years. 75 starts at.
That's a what?
Goodbye would be payment for the
So that's about a 2% increase in the town tax rate.
We use the 70,000 this year.
Or reduce the amount of the bond.
Yeah.
Yeah, either way, that could be done.
You know, I've got my calculator in my head, so what does 105 mean actual tax rate?
What is it, 2 cents?
No, it's 2%.
2%. 2%.
So what, so 28 cents?
I do, but I don't know.
14 cents maybe. Well, 14, 15 cents, I think.
We're 700. Yeah, 14.
14 cents or
So it's
thereabouts.
a $200,000 home, that would be
28 bucks.
Which comes to
$28. So I think that's the number we also, I gotta get ahead of. It's
Mhm.
worth doing this for $28 on a $200,000 home.
In terms of the warrant article, are you thinking it's coming from the select board or a petitioned warrant article from your committee?
You're gonna have more weight if it came from you folks, but
Yeah.
if we'll do it, then maybe we'll have to do it.
I
I think the whole logic of this is to try to sell you the information, and you have to decide how you want to go. I think the whole genesis of this project was back a year ago when Dan Wenchett said, why do we want to put any money into that roof if we're not going to keep the buildings?
Mhm.
We owe it to the town voters to say, this is a yes or no vote on keeping the building and putting whatever you need to into it, which is reasonable, with what would be reasonable, or just decide you're going to tear it down. You're not going to put any money into it, and now the only dilemma with that is you've got to find a place to put it to ground and whatever storage you can rationalize that we should do. I think that's the bottom line.
You want to have whoever's speaking come up. They're having a hard time hearing.
Oh, everyone is having a hard time?
Yeah, well, Jeff is too.
Jeff is-
Oh, he's not.
It's Jeff, but he's not on.
Oh, so he's only hearing through this.
That's right.
If the stabilization were to happen, is there a time horizon that the rehabilitation then needs to take place before you start throwing a lot more money to do that? Like how much, if you do the stabilization, it sounds like you get to a place that's relatively neutral.
Yeah,
And then how much time before, the costs to do the full rehabilitation start skyrocketing after that?
I'm not sure that's an easy to answer or possible to answer question.
That's fair.
The skyrocketing cost is really the touch and go.
Okay.
If we move forward with stabilization, I think we would want to sit down with CIP and plan out budgeting and sort of start to prioritize. So I don't want to speak for anybody, but I would look at the exterior envelope. So siding, trim, doors, windows, sort of all the things that continue to protect the building. I mean, they have aesthetic improvements, but we really want to protect them. So that would be sort of step one. Fire suppression. So you could almost outline chunks of work and put budgets and say, well, if we're going to do this in 3 years, if it's, $200,000 now, then it would be, 200,000 plus 5% a year.
Yeah.
So we could work through a phased, get to the rehabilitation manner in a more planned fashion. But I don't think we've really spent enough time to lay out.
No.
What is the next step?
Yeah, that's fair. And the stabilization phase, how long do you think that should take? I understand you want to get all the money at this coming town meeting, but assuming you did, over what time period do all those items need to be done by?
So they're projecting about 4 months of construction from the time they start. There would need to be some detailed engineering done and some drawings and some bid period. And, so if it passed in March and the funds were there, I think we would look to do construction, maybe summer or maybe even started in September after the summer construction season. And it would be done, ideally before the snow flies.
And that's just for the stabilization.
Yeah. You could probably do something similar with the rehabilitation. You're just getting more subcontractors working at the building at the same time. I think they were saying, was it 6 months, 7 months? So it's a little bit longer duration. You may want to start sooner, starting in September for a project like that, where you're doing siding is a little bit challenging. So I think there's some details that would need to be worked out, but in either case, we would hope to have it accomplished before the snow flies next year.
And again, if the money was approved, would you be looking for Milestone to do it, or would you be going out for competitive bidders?
Oh, I think we would definitely have to do some kind of competitive bid. Milestone would be great. I would happily work with them and see the town work with them, but they were hired as an estimator to do budgeting. There's no commitment for them to get the project. So I think there would be some kind of bidding or, qualification-based selection process that we'd want to go through.
One other scenario in our discussions of if the bonding did the minimum, 875. And then if we got the matching funds later on in the year, in the fall, say it was $200,000, that could either go back towards the 875, or you could start getting into the next level. In my opinion, would be, I think that shared by the group, that fire suppression is probably the next one beyond build.
Right.
Because you got a big liability sitting there, with more investment in it, the other two buildings that are very vulnerable in the worst scenario. So that might be the first one that you, instead of putting it backwards, you put it forward to do that part of the project with the 200,000 or whatever was matched.
I think that makes sense, because one of the things I was thinking of, if we proceed, don't read my question as agreeing to anything at this point, but if we put $800,000 into the structure without fire suppression, what is that going to do to our insurance rates?
Probably nothing. Because we're in a risk pool.
Yeah, I'm not sure it would change it. But you don't want to spend $800,000 on a building and then have something happen to it, and right? I mean, there's still the emotional loss of $800,000.
Neil, I don't want to seem high maintenance. Is there any way to turn off that light is like super bright right there? Is that normally on? It's like, I don't know why, it's just shining in my eyes tonight. Thank you.
Just got highlighted in the room.
Thank you. One other question, and thank you for this, very helpful, and please don't read into my question, I just am curious. In terms of what we use the barn for right now, is there a world in which it gets torn down? I mean, if voters didn't approve spending money on it, it gets torn down and we make do with what we have? Or is there an absolute need to build something new?
So buildings and grounds is underneath, they have stuff there. And all the HISA stuff and other storage stuff is upstairs. Look at other buildings. Possibly we have the rescue building, we have the working with the Kentucky Village Precinct, it's just a small garage at George Park.
Right, it's not
Those might be
ideal.
able to be used if you were.
Yeah,
There's no clear place for buildings and grounds to go to.
yeah.
And they want to have the equipment on that property.
This was used mostly.
Right. I mean, it could be up at Public Works on Maple Street, but then they're transporting everything.
Yeah.
Plus there's no space.
I guess I'd suggest that you cannot go up to the highway department and have a shelter, because they're building stuff full of highway equipment.
Right.
And our package will show you pictures of that building, how it's filled.
Yeah.
Also the stuff that's in the barn. As part of the package.
Yeah.
So realistically, we would need probably some new storage.
Just the sports equipment, there's a lot of, and even if that's reduced, which some of it already has been, there's still a lot.
Well, the recreation department uses at least, I would say, not quite half, but almost half of that barn. Stuff around. There is miscellaneous other usage from other, but town departments and the fire department, they would have to go to another training facility. They're commuting, going somewhere else. So when you look at it, you have three town departments using that building.
Yeah.
So they have to go somewhere else.
So you were talking about another package for
Yes,
next week?
no, not next week.
No, we don't have a meeting next
A few
week.
weeks though.
But like,
Some more information you'll be providing to us?
so in about 3 weeks to a month's time, we want to be able to bundle up everything. So the outlining all the information that has led us up to this point, so the studies, the briefing officer studies, what we've done in the past. And then to give you a little synopsis of what has happened, what has got us to this point that we've happened. And then some more information on our presentation tonight.
Really just written formal.
Jeff, could you provide us some more information on the cost estimates that you're throwing out?
Sure. I mean, I use a commercial cost estimating service called Marshall and Swift. They publish square footage construction costs for various types and classes of buildings. They have local multipliers for each type of building. And the local multiplier that we would use is Concord, New Hampshire. That's why I asked if they're designing another building that looks like the barn we have, I could see that costing $300 a square foot. If it's just a storage building, whether that's metal sided or wood sided, whether it's a gable frame roof or a flat roof, it's not $320 a square foot. It's just not. I mean, you can make it that if you overbuilt it to a level that's not required for storage. That's all we're talking about here is storage. And it doesn't have to be there. It could be at the DPW yard.
When you're doing that, Jeff, we also put in the cost of the fire suppression system that needs to go in, and also the demolition of the barn. That would have.
I'm sorry, I cannot hear what, I think that's Louise.
Yeah. Do you want to come talking to this speaker? We can.
Yeah, the select board comes in very clearly. I'm just having a hard time, and I'm sorry that I'm not there, but.
Let's reach to.
Actually, if you could use the little.
That's not connected.
So Jeff, I was saying that while you're gathering your information, we've also put in, so we're doing apples to apples, that you would also factor in the fire suppression system. That you would also factor in the demolition of the barn, because if we're not worth saving, then we got to take it down.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if we couldn't actually sell that and have someone else take it down, but
Well, I like to
I'll have a
know.
guy come and look at that for us.
All right. Because we do have an estimate for that, so I'd like to compare that to yours when you get yours.
Yeah,
So can I add, this is Dave Feller, Jeff. We discussed.
Feller.
Yeah,
I can attest that.
I was trying to go under the radar, we discussed that, the square foot costs and whatnot with Milestone, and his strong feeling was, we're not building a storage, a building for Dave Feller or Louise Carr. We're building it for the town, and all the costs and whatnot that are associated with building a municipal type structure that's going to last does drive the cost up. So I know what you're talking about and the estimates you're talking about, but we did address that. He felt pretty strong. I agree.
Yeah, and again, that's why I opened with what kind of building are we envisioning here? Because, yeah, I mean, I worked on a renovation of a property 20 years ago. The renovation cost was $1,000 a foot because they were restoring it and it was historic. And I mean, depending on what you want to build, yeah, you can spend all that money. I'm looking here at a good quality municipal service garage, which would be similar to what you're talking about, Dave. $130 a square foot.
So you had said, you know, 1.4 for 10,000, it's about 120 a square foot. So, you know, if you add the
You
cost,
want to come back up, so.
if you add the cost, if you add the cost, say that that's $75,000 or $100,000 to remove the barn. We're not looking at a building like the barn. I don't think that was ever discussed. But even so, if you add $100,000, you make it 1.3, and now we're talking about a wood frame metal or a metal building versus a more stable, longer lasting building, and you compare the 1.3 to what the whole project here is going to cost of 1.6. As Jason already said, includes a 20% contingency in that. So the question is 1.6 versus 1.3. I don't know. I think as conservative as I am, I think I go with it, keep the barn and the existing place and go with the 1.6 and hopefully bring that 20% contingency down by half.
You know, 10,000 square feet is also, you know, 15% larger than what we're talking about here. So at 8,800 feet, $130 a foot is lower, closer to 1.1 million versus the 1.8 that's on my slide here. And again, you know, it is what it is. My question was, if the costs were substantially lower to replace the barn, would it affect the decision?
No.
Okay.
Right, so I guess it's getting at the obvious question of the value of,
There's some intangibles here.
yeah. And it's a fair question, yeah. Thank you for answering that. So yeah, so obviously, you know, there's a, I don't know what the right word is, like a value coming from this group, which I appreciate, which is there's something to saving that building and properly investing in it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, it's early. I tend to work on avoiding debates on square foot pricing and budgeting. We've got a reputable contractor who's understandably conservative, which pushes the number up, with contingencies on conservative budgeting, with contingencies on top of that, right? So you can see how all this builds. But you can't build a building for $130 a square foot. You just can't. You can't buy materials to build a building, never mind hiring labor to do it. And I've gotten enough of these conversations. So it's just not, it's not a practical comparison, never mind the intangibles of saving, you know, 100-plus-year-old piece of the town history, which I think has a value to it.
Mhm.
So no, I don't think it would change our recommendation.
So that brings me back to a point that Stephen raised a little bit ago, which is, you know, if cost were not an issue, we would want to save the barn.
Yes.
Stephen raised the idea of private fundraising. And I think that is something to consider in this scenario, because money obviously is a factor, because this is a municipal building. The whole town pays for it. But I do think that there is something to be said. I think there's a good likelihood that there are folks who would pay above and beyond just that tax increase to preserve the barn.
I wouldn't discount that at all. I think that's a great idea. The challenge there is to get that underway and to launch a fundraising campaign. We would have to purposely put this off a year, which then just comes back to, we've got a leaking roof on a building that we feel strongly we should invest in. So it could be, if you were willing, amenable to move forward with stabilization, then fundraising to do some of the rehabilitation. Absolutely. And I think that those could run on parallel tracks.
Yeah.
Just like LCHIP grants and any other grants that may be available to save the building. I think I think there's certainly a lot of value.
Seems like a reasonable sort of middle path in
Yeah,
a lot of ways.
absolutely.
I did have
And
another,
that private ownership, I think, goes a long way in town.
right.
How long am I going off?
No, you're absolutely correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I did have a question about the roof, another question about the roof, because that seems
Yeah.
like that's a real sticking point. Do you have sort of a cost comparison for replacing the roof with asphalt
Yes.
shingles versus the standing seam metal?
Yep.
And-
It was like $50,000 or $60,000 savings.
It was $80,000.
88 savings. Okay, so it was a fairly significant savings to go with the new asphalt roof in the tune of
Yeah.
$60,000 or $70,000.
Yeah.
We could firm that number up.
And again, like my colleagues, don't interpret this as advocating for one thing or another, but I'm just for comparison's sake. What if the asphalt roof was replaced like ASAP? Then you could proceed with the, I forget, your stabilization plan.
Yep.
And then at some point in the future, build it into the CIP as part of the rehab process, maybe. Then replace the roof, hopefully we get actually 20+ years out of a asphalt shingle roof.
Sure.
So not necessarily biting that bullet now, putting that one.
Yeah, so take the upfront savings now and move that forward. I think if that's the way you want to go, then,
It's not a huge amount of money when you're in the whole, scheme of it, but, if it's an option to,
I think it.
Buy some
I think it could be an option. I guess we'd have to go back and really look at, would it be safe to get up on the roof, to redo the roof without the structural, but, certainly if you could do it and protect the building immediately.
Yeah.
I think that could be another option.
And there's also, when we get to the point of raising the building for the foundation, you're also risking the damaging of the shingles, the shifting of it, so.
but as I understand it, less so than with the metal seam roof,
Less, but it still is.
but
Yeah, I
it's still
think-
a risk.
Yeah.
Okay.
So even if it was asphalt shingles, the order of priority wouldn't change. The roofing would be last. In my mind, yeah.
You're spending a lot of money on something. You don't want to put it on and then in hindsight go, I wish we did it the other way because now we're damaging the after this.
Right.
So it's, we have spent many months. And just in this last couple of weeks, I can't tell you how much we have communicated and met and looked at these numbers and crunched and recrunched. And Frank has been so patient with us and has met with us so many times. We really are trying to pull forward to you a very realistic budget. We're trying to get to you to understand, we're giving you what needs to be done at a minimum. And the cost, they may be inflated because like you said, all the contingencies and being conservative. We won't know the true number until we go and bid. But you have to prove first, so. It's just, we have spent a lot of time, we've asked a lot of questions, we have re-examined so many times and different things that I think we have done our due diligence and we're giving you the best scenarios that we can.
I have one more. So the level of rehab that you have costed out. If there was, as Brini said, if there was a world in which the storage use for that upper floor were magically found to be able to be accommodated somewhere else, would the level of rehab on that upper floor be able to accommodate other uses? Or is it sort of a minimal amount of rehab so that it can only be used for storage going forward?
I feel obligated to say, what are the uses?
So, okay, so,
What do you think?
yeah, so in conversations that I've had with a few folks in town, a strong desire has come forward for a event space, an indoor,
Yeah.
large event space. And this barn is just beautiful and centrally located, and there's plenty of parking, and everybody knows it. And this is the type of thing, for example, for a concert or an art gallery installation, or
I think.
theater performance.
I think what we were proposing for the rehabilitation wouldn't necessarily preclude that. I think when you start talking about an assembly space, right, a function space, there are some higher level code considerations that we need to look at.
Yeah.
Which I don't think were addressed in the rehabilitation. And then really, I'm thinking, there's probably an extra door or two for egress that we would have to do. And exactly how that'd be accomplished, I can't say off the top of my head. Lighting would become a question. Power may or may not be an issue. We were running power to the building to running a service there to really support DPW, and then some minor heat and the fire suppression system.
Yep.
So you probably want to run more power. Is that necessarily more expensive? It's, not significant.
Marginal, maybe.
Yeah, but it's something, so all of those things start to domino.
Yeah.
It would increase the scope of the project a little bit.
Yeah.
But it would be really hard to say at this point.
One of the long-term thoughts that we had in this whole process, at least as hard as compounding from what you said, that everything that we are designing to do here is done so we don't have to do it again if we wanted to go to the next level.
Right.
One of the things that we asked, and I'm not sure Louise and I were in that session, I asked them, what would it take to take the second number? Well, let's just go with the stabilization. What would it take to do it for what you're suggesting 20 years down the road? And what's the minimum you'd have to do that extra bracing? It's really about seismic type events that you have to deal with as soon as you get into the assembly, where you have people building.
Right.
Milestone suggested, I didn't use that so well, yes, but somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 would give you that extra bracing to satisfy those structural zoning codes that you'd have to have.
Yeah.
So it's not astronomical.
Yeah.
Because you have all the other finishing steps.
And
Everything we've done is to be able to do that next level whenever it comes, if it ever comes.
yeah, and I think if that ever arrives, I think your fundraising potential just balloons exponentially.
I think to get private funds to stabilize the barn, I think the hardest sell is the town building. But when you start going out and talking venue space, and then they have the ability.
And there's potential income there too, if you're,
Yeah.
charging.
Oh, yeah,
Rent it, so.
you can, there's
It's
a
a,
huge.
it's a very challenging business you're talking about.
I know some people who are pretty good at it, so.
But it's an interesting concept, because you look at Diamond Hill down there, she started with the barn out rehab, basically, like we're thinking of here.
Yeah.
She had endless requests for wedding venues there and other types of parties. And it was just, it was distracting her from her regular business, and she had to say, I can't deal with this, because there's so many people lined up a year or 2 years ahead for the venue for that kind of situation.
There you go.
But it's there, but that's a whole nother concept.
It is. It is. I just wanted to make sure, and I thank you for that explanation. I just wanted to make sure that, as you say, if that comes to light 10, 20 years from now, that you won't have to be going through this again.
Correct.
We as a group did not want to touch that because it's a whole other issue.
It is.
Considerably more.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we also, in the things that need to be done to stabilize the barn, don't preclude that in the future. They're all add-on items. So that's a good point, Alan.
Wonderful.
Kids deal with that.
Yes, exactly. We'll start planting those seeds now. My daughter's 7. She'll take it on. It's her high school project.
So I had just a couple of thoughts, and then I guess a question for the other board members. Looking at our CIP plan, you know, if we went to town meeting in March and this got approved, you know, we wouldn't have to pay anything for the 22 fiscal year. The first debt service payment will probably be 23. 23, there's a really big CIP increase. Over from 22 to 23, there's an increase of more than almost $250,000 in CIP spending. So one observation is, you know, if we're going to do this via bond, maybe put off principal payment until after 23, which may impact the interest we pay over the life of the bond. But if we want to level out the tax hit, that's maybe one way to think about it. The other one is that the other observation is that we do have ARPA funds.
Yeah. Which if we bonded, we couldn't use to pay off the bond, but if we.
No, but we could
Right.
bond less,
Right.
and that could be another source of revenue to
Yep.
pay for this.
Yep.
And that's just another observation. I mean, yeah, that's another observation. And then the question for the board is just what do we want to do with this tonight and moving forward? Because this is kind of a lot to kind of digest and figure out what to do. So, you know, if we were going to do a bond, you know, I think we have some time before we have to make that decision. But for the sake of the budget committee and their process, we probably want to try to arrive someplace so that they can also include this in their process of preparation for town meeting.
Right.
Right, also toss something out there, just
Yep.
consideration. Well, it's not a common path. There are towns who have just gotten private commercial loans from the bank.
Yep.
And if you could do that, a couple of benefits on a project this size is if we were to get $200,000 from LCHIP and not advance the project, we could use it to prepay some of the debt. And you could also structure it where it's paid for in 2 years, therefore avoiding the big CIP hit. Well, you know, I'm sensitive to what my taxes are, like everybody else. In terms of looking at level debt, I don't know if there's some benefits to doing that. But I think,
We always look at that as an option. When we did the fire station, it was a real bank.
right,
So that we didn't have to borrow all it.
yep, and Warner
It depends on.
did
right
their
now, the
fire
bond-
station.
The bond bank is so low that it's hard to beat.
Right, but do you have no opportunity to prepay? And if I added that up, we were paying $110,000 in interest. You know, that is something to think about over the long term.
Were you going to say something, Ken?
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts.
Maybe you want to share.
Yeah, first, I guess if we're looking at keying on the 875 and in our CIP now, it'd be 70 some odd thousand, so we might only have to borrow 800,000. 800,000 is, I believe, less than 1% hit on the tax rate each year. I don't want to start looking to use ARPA funds now, beyond how we're already planning to use them. In terms of the budget committee, I mean, I'll be presenting Wednesday, and you know, unless the board acts differently, I'll just tell them, well, we had some discussions about this. and that's where it stands. I mean, I'd like to see the, you know, the more complete report that you're preparing, and I'd like to give Jeff an opportunity to counter it, because I don't know what kind of a dollar difference it is. I think the barn is a great asset, and I'd like to keep it. But if there's $1 million difference or something, that's a different story.
We can get all the information milestones sent. That would be good. Hopefully, if you're meeting, you're posting it. It's my hat of, he said, oh, we're meeting a lot. And
Well, no, it's been,
as long as it's a few of it's not.
yeah, no, it hasn't been the full board, and we've gone to talk to Frank at his office, so that's, we would send the work sessions. I don't know if it's not really, this would be open to the public if they wanted to come down there, but the ones we have met as a full board, I have mentioned to you.
Yes, as long as there's a quorum.
Yep.
Whether it's here or.
Yep.
Concord or.
Yep, no, on the off ones I had mentioned, I think you both.
So we do have a lot to discuss on this. I do think, I mean, I personally would like to hear, not necessarily like a straw vote, but I think we sort of owe it to this group to give them some sense of where our heads are. So it would be helpful if everyone would share. I mean, just generally, there's details, perhaps Jeff will counter. But speaking for myself, if it were right now, I had to decide, I would absolutely support putting something in the $800,000 range to the voters. So that's where I stand.
I'm not surprised if somebody would say I agree.
Okay, good.
I also agree, and I like the thought of going ahead with the stabilization idea and then trying a private, private fundraising on top of that for the full rehab, seeing how far it goes.
I guess I'm supportive of keeping something. I kind of want to hear from Jeff and see a little more information about if there's a less expensive way to provide a comparable product. But I am supportive of there being something. And if there's not a comparable way, then yeah, I would probably support going to the ordinance and asking. But I hope there is.
Can I request that whatever Jeff comes up with, that gets to the board, so that, I mean, to the committee, so that we can also see, so we can talk about it too and see what we have and see.
It'll be part of the public record, it's brought to the board meeting, so.
And Jeff,
I think all of us feel that there's a better way to do this, cheap way to solve the problem. Having storage, fitting into the campus up there.
Yeah.
That's gonna be sort of this.
Yeah.
That can be done. Please bring it forward, because we struggle to get down this.
yeah, and I think you absolutely, I mean, you have done an excellent job and I really appreciate it. Like, we're at a point where we either put the money in and do it, or just drop it and we demolish the thing and move forward with. But that's sort of where I think we are. It's like enough. And you've done a great job giving us something very reasonable and tangible to work with. Jeff, I don't know if you want to say anything.
I was just going to say that I actually disagree with Ken. This is the kind of project that we were discussing for potential use of the ARPA money, a capital improvement that we could accelerate. So if we were to move forward, I would strongly consider that.
I agree with you, Jeff. I'm glad you said that. We were looking for one-time projects. Exactly right.
That's right.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's almost half of the amount that they're talking about. And you could do the stabilization, jack the building up, do the foundation, and then do the roof.
Mhm.
Let me explain to the committee, because there seems to be some questions about what we're talking about. ARPA is the American Rescue Plan Act. The town will be receiving slightly over $600,000 to be spent in 3 years. What the board had agreed upon prior to tonight was that we'd spend $201,000 for 2022 for to give the DPW their full budget request, which includes $40,000 increase because salt prices jumped, and including 5% including every year for shipping and payment. And we did not determine for years 2023 and 2024 how that remaining $400,000 would be spent. Being the way I am, I'm trying to hold it in reserve. But I understand what the rest of the board is saying, and it does make sense. And if Don agrees that it should be spent on the barn as opposed to roads, that would make me feel a lot better.
Come and say that.
Well, I think, I'm sorry, we can't be more definitive tonight, but appreciating that, we just finished our budget and poor Ken has to present on in 2 days.
Yeah.
But I think you've gotten hopefully a good sense of where our collective heads are and that we're, I would say, generally supportive of what you've proposed with some caveats.
What, if anything, would you like from us on Wednesday
For budget?
For the budget committee?
for the budget?
Yeah, do you want
You
someone
want
to
us to
talk?
present something, or do you want to take it, or?
No, I mean, I will just really briefly summarize what, we've heard tonight. Dawn is on the committee also. But it's, at this point, it's nothing that the select board has endorsed. It's not in our budget. It's not in our warrant articles. But I want to, let the budget committee be apprised that it may be coming down the road.
I think after tonight, you're sort of giving an agreement that, yes, we need to do something. Based on that, you flat out said, no, nothing, going to budget committee is really useless to do. I would suggest that I'm going to follow the chair of the budget and say, can we have a presentation by Jason or whoever else will do it to the budget? Just to give them an idea of what this is, because other departments come into it, do it. I think we owe it to the budget committee to hear at least a summary.
If you'd rather go that way as opposed to my doing the summary, that's fine.
Yeah, I would, because I think this is something like a department view coming to the budget committee as a separate entity. But again, if you guys are gonna call that, I mean,
Whatever we do, we want to do it together. We don't want to seem like we're going and stating something that you're stating something else. That's the last thing.
Are you better off having a plan to present to them, though? I think they should know that this is there. But the departments generally don't go to the budget committee.
But if they want to hear more, if they want to see your presentation, like nothing's stopping.
I'll ask the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. And can you can talk.
You could say that Ken plans to speak to it, but they wanted more information.
I think that's a good way to do it. I think, Ken, if you could summarize, and then we could just be there to support. I cannot be there at the board meeting. But I think it'd be great where we could support whatever additional information that you'd like us to. That's really good.
I think I'd be comfortable with that as a plan.
Okay. I'm unclear because I work in way too many SB2 towns. What is the timeline for warrant articles?
The board needs to finalize.
Is it
Tuesday,
February?
end of January.
End of January. Okay. So we've got a little bit extra.
It'll go fast, but yeah.
It will go fast.
Ken, I didn't quite understand what you said. You agree that we ought to have backup?
I'll summarize and say, the board is certainly sympathetic to the, thinks that it's appropriate. But I won't go into any extensive detail, like you did tonight. And if, I guess if budget committee members, want to ask more detailed questions beyond, my knowledge, you or where Jason will be there to respond.
I'm going to recuse myself from sitting on the budget committee relative to this vote about this. Just because I'm on this committee.
Mhm.
Yeah, so if you're comfortable doing that, the summary will be just here to answer any questions which you can.
Yeah, what I can do, what it can handle, to handle it is, just like Neil will be there to back me up with any questions I can't answer, which will probably be voluminous. You know, you'll be there to help me out if there are questions I can't answer. But, you know, you have to remember, I can't say that the select board supports doing it. You know, we're sympathetic at this point.
Yeah.
So is it possible, you were talking about, what Gavin mentioned, 600,000?
ARPA.
Yeah,
So it's 200, you've already pre-planned, so then you have 400. Is it possible to take the 400 and then bond the 470, 470?
It would be possible.
I think so.
It would have to be 470, we already have 70, so it would be 400.
400, yeah, I mean, there's a
Yeah.
lot of things that are possible.
That would be
That's
a
one
whole lot
alternative.
easier to swallow what the town on taxes.
that is definitely in the realm of possibility.
If you take,
Don't want
if you take 200,000 that was anticipating would be revenues in 2023, and that's a 4% hit on the tax rate by itself. So if you're taking that away, you know, that's putting more pressure on the tax rate. But just something to be thinking about.
Well, thank you. Oh, I'm even in my.
I was just gonna say, is there anything else we could help you with on this?
Give us some more money.
Register lots of new cars.
Yeah.
Buried in the foundation of the barn.
Really expensive.
Well, I think, yeah, we'll be in touch certainly, and more details for us to discuss and figure out, but thank you again for how much work and time and effort you've put in. I mean, really, thank you. It
Yeah,
needed to
thank
be
you.
done and you did it. so-
And it's incredibly clear, which
Yeah.
is really nice. Thank you.
Yeah,
And we will continue to, if you decide to move forward with the project, then we will have the ability to look for grant monies. And I think, but we can't move forward, you know. But, you know, we will do that. also.
Mhm.
This is a great product and you guys did a lot of work. So yeah, it's really, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank
Thanks, you
you.
too.
Right,
More money.
so that brings us on to old business, which is planning and building fee update is first.
I'm gonna suggest we multiply everything by 10.
That would help.
So you have the recommended fees. You're here. They're based on similar towns and what towns do. They haven't been updated in a while. The next thing on the agenda is also the refuge disposal ordinance, which contains new fees. The ordinance definitely needs a public hearing. If you want to schedule a public hearing on these at the same time, we can do that. And the ordinance and both fee updates as the other public hearing, and the ARPA money is the third public hearing. All out at the next.
All right.
meeting of that.
Fun.
Sense. Are there any changes or questions for Karen?
I didn't have any changes. I'm really happy she did this work. Do you know what communities she looked at? Or some of the kind of how she filtered them to see what
I
they were doing?
know Concord almost always doesn't really, they're different. So
Yeah.
I think it was Bow and Henniker, but I can check with her. to be sure.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what the measuring stick is that she used.
Yeah, and I was surprised, there were only there were a few that didn't change, but they seemed like relatively minor things, but like the first one, I just was curious to know why, it seems like maybe that the residential / new / additions, why that 24 cents did not change. I'm assuming it's because,
It must have been in line.
yeah, that's what my guess
And there
is,
may
but
have been things that were updated through the years.
that weren't,
The
that's old,
original was
okay,
2008, but I don't think all these fees were necessarily 2008.
okay,
And it's adding an application fee too.
yeah,
Although
I know,
In reality, it's been really slow building from 2008 until
Last year.
last year.
Yeah.
So we're in a different time, so that.
Yeah.
well, if there's no proposed changes,
And as far as the revenue assumptions in our budget for 2022, do they use the higher fees?
It's way too hard to figure. Hopefully we'll get higher fees, but there's so many factors involved, it's hard to just randomly. It would be randomly, which is not.
Okay.
Right, because it's not as though everything is doubling or everything is going up by a certain percentage, or,
Right.
I mean, you could find like the average increase and maybe,
Okay.
but that's,
It sounds like tough to predict.
Yeah.
Until we have a year or two of actuals to
yeah.
kind of go on.
So then are we talking about the refuse disposal also?
yeah, I was gonna
now?
say we should move on if no one has any.
Okay. On that one, I had a question on this, the rates for septic discharge fees. I believe that's unchanged from at least 2012. And it's $50 per 1,000 gallons. And the only one I could find to compare to was Concord, and that's either $65 in district or $70 out of district. So I'm wondering why the $50 shouldn't be something higher.
We'll check on that. And we know that's a costly thing for us.
I was trying to figure out how much it costs us or how much revenue we bring in, and I didn't have line items that would get into that detail. That was all I had on that.
All right. So we could schedule,
Schedule
all
that
right,
too.
perfect.
Well, I mean, I'm all in favor of scheduling this one also. What is our current tipping fee for commercial and residential?
I believe it is the same for both.
Like
Um,
75?
I think it's 85.
Okay.
Our rate goes up January 1, and this was designed to be over the rate. By, I think, 10% over the rate. So there's some factor in there every time.
Okay.
Which is somewhat new. I think it had always been just the rate,
Yeah.
but we have to handle that. We have to do the equipment. We have to do all that. So I think that is reasonable. It's still a reasonable.
Okay. And just to your question, Neil, about doing all three of these public hearings, I don't know if I'm ready to do the public hearing on ARPA yet. I'm just thinking about how we want to continue this conversation about how best to use those funds. We want to have input from Jeff and hopefully the report from this committee and do the public hearing and decide, or do we want to move the public hearing out?
Don't we have to have the public hearing before the end of the year?
I don't know.
Because we received the funds. You don't necessarily have to determine how to.
True.
But I think we have, I can check on that, but
Yeah.
I think by the end of the year, we have to accept them. So that they don't go back into the general fund as unanticipated.
If that may be true, I don't know. And if that is the case, then I'm fine doing the public hearing and just, extending our deliberations until a little closer to the end of the year. But yeah, if that's the case, then we should schedule it.
I'll check it. We don't have to, well, if we
Yeah.
have to, we'll have it, and then there may not be details.
That's just my own, sort of thought process.
So Stephen, you're thinking that possibly at the public hearing, we have to state how we're gonna use the whole 600,000?
No.
Just for next year?
No, it sounds like had some questions about what Jeff may come forward with and the background information that the Houston Barn Committee used. And that may influence how we want to use the ARPA funds. And I just didn't know how long it would take for Jeff and the committee to give us that information. And I just, I guess I see your point. We and certainly don't have to decide the same night there's a public hearing.
I also think we probably have a general idea. I mean, we've got 200,000 slated for salt and whatever. And so the questions around the remaining 400,000, I think it's likely some of that will go to the barn if we move forward with that. But I mean, I think we've got like a general idea of where we're headed with it, even though we have to hammer out details. But if we do have to have it by the end of the year, we're running out of runway here. Yeah. Or even if we had a special meeting, I mean, we don't have a ton of time to work with, so.
Yeah, what is our meeting? I mean, next meeting is in 2 weeks.
It's the 20th,
Yes.
yeah,
And then
that would be
that's
it.
it for the year.
All right, then we probably should do the public.
I think it's kind of why.
You guys have convinced me that's the way to do it.
Well, it doesn't have to be like specifically and permanently earmarked for certain things, right? Okay,
And it's to accept the whole amount. even though
Okay.
We haven't received it.
Okay.
They've clearly recommended that that's what. we do.
Okay. I'm like nervous we haven't done that yet. I need to like get this
Well, I've been
done.
watching it. This is kind of it.
Okay. Okay. Can we move on to year-to-date financials?
Sure, you have them. We've been through them, so there's no real changes from what we've been talking about for the last month. So I guess if people have questions, I'm happy to answer. There's no thing we'll do another one of these in 2 weeks as to where we are. And we're watching it very closely. I think our bottom line will be fine.
Do you want me to ask about the thing?
Go right ahead.
Neil?
Sure. So they have circulated amongst themselves, is what they told me, a plan, and they will be sending that to us. I tried to get them here tonight, and I did offer next week if they absolutely had to. Mike said they did have a plan, he had received it, and it was going on.
Some questions, but probably they're just more backup for the budget committee. At this point, we're still estimating that revenues for this calendar year will exceed our original estimates by 100,000 or more.
Yes.
And as far as expenses concerned, are we anticipating any significant amount below budget?
No. As of today, no.
Yeah.
We may, but We're pretty close. I've got us just over 100,000 remaining, but then auditors do all their adjustments, and so we're pretty, that's way closer than I'd like to be. And that's conservative.
And I think in the past for solid waste, you had mentioned something about you had to transfer 7,000 out of that to sewer. Has that been done?
No, 7,000 will come out, and there's an additional $13,000 bill in, so actually it's going up.
And the reason is that basically all due to testing?
It is, it's the testing and the permitting at the transfer station. ES asked for additional information. It's our 5-year permit, I believe.
And the road bonds, what at this point, what do you expect to be left at the end of this calendar year?
There's another, which was the bill that's in your packet, which was the final bill on Tyler Bridge. So I don't know. I can figure that out, but that's, once that comes out, we're pretty much where the bond is.
So what is left to do on the bond for next year?
So what is left to do? The bond is, what was coming out of the bond? It must be culverts. Kearsarge is done, Briar Hill is done. Our tree culverts. I think the rest was Briar Hill.
And the other half of the bridge.
The other half of the bridge, right, which we didn't. Yes, yeah, Tyler Bridge. That's one reason there's as much as the Tyler Bridge.
The candy supplied different ends.
And I guess just for tomorrow, if you could, for Wednesday, have available what projects Dan hopes to tackle in through his regular budget.
That's listed in the budget.
It is in there, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's mostly Briar Hill, but it is listed on the,
It does.
I was gonna say the shaving and pinning line.
Well, yeah, I think we are
Hate when
pinning.
that happens.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any updates, Neil?
Sure, Tyler Bridge, the last payment is there to the contractor. The total contract was $329,985. And the final cost of the bridge was $318,606, meaning they underspent by $11,329. So that was good. It opened on time. It unofficially opened. when people moved the
Earlier
barricades
than
earlier, but,
that is not advisable, by the way.
So
Why do people think that was okay?
I do not know. So I think that's been a really successful, that was a good project. And that was good. I am excited for my LPA certificate.
Neil, congrats.
2-day trainings last week that allows us to manage local
It is a thankless
projects. It's really a lot of federal stuff. The other thing I've been working on is really budget stuff and presentation and all of that. We already did the same with custodians. We met with Health Trust last week, Health Trust and interlocal trusts working on health insurance stuff. So that's moving forward. I think that was it.
All right, thank you.
Taxes were due today.
Hmm.
The lines were long. Kara's been helping.
Mm.
Due when taxes are due, we can take payments and keep things moving. So it's been a busy couple weeks, people wise, in and out as people do that. So
Thank you, Kara.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Do any of our attendees want to speak at this point for public forum? All right,
Raise your hand or.
thank you for joining us. Anything under other?
I'd like to thank Neil for all of his help in
Hmm.
Mhm.
preparing for Wednesday.
Yeah, and thank you, Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Ken.
Yes, thank you.
Are those meetings, you can attend over Zoom, right? Or is it all in person? Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
Both ways.
just like these.
I'll be there virtually.
I'll call on you to help me.
I'll be there for moral support, but I would not call on you for help.
I'm gonna Zoom from my office.
Okay, so we have two non-publics. So we will say goodnight to our attendees and thank you for being here with us. And after non-public, we will adjourn and not conduct any other business. So I'll make a motion that we go into non-public under RC 91A32D, two of those.
Second?
All right, I'm a yes. Anna?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Steven?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
All right, thank you.